It was an ordinary night, or so it seemed. Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock had just wrapped up a long day of filming a new action-packed movie. They had become fast friends over the years, and tonight they were just two regular people, trying to relax and unwind at a cozy hotel in a quiet town. The hotel was charming, with dark mahogany furniture and soft lighting that gave the place an old-world feel. The two of them checked into their room, a spacious suite with a balcony overlooking the city. They unpacked their bags, ordered some food, and then plopped down on the bed to catch up on their lives. The day had been long, so before they knew it, they both drifted off into a peaceful sleep. Hours passed, and as the moonlight streamed through the balcony door, they both remained deep in slumber. But then, something strange happened. Keanu suddenly stirred, waking up to a muffled sound. He rubbed his eyes, trying to adjust to the dimly lit room. Sandra, still fast asleep, was unaware of the noise. Keanu listened closely, and his heart skipped a beat when he realized that two men were whispering just behind him. "Do you think they know?" one man whispered in a hushed voice. "I'm not sure," the other replied, "but it's better if they don't." Keanu's brow furrowed. He didn't know what they were talking about or who these mysterious voices belonged to. He slowly turned his head, but the room was empty. Just the sound of his own breathing and Sandra's light snoring filled the air. Keanu glanced over at Sandra, half expecting her to wake up, but she remained undisturbed. What on earth was going on? He strained to hear more of the conversation, but it had stopped as abruptly as it had begun. The silence hung thick in the air. The whispers returned a moment later, but this time they were louder and clearer. "We can't let them find out," one voice hissed. "It's too dangerous." Keanu's mind raced. He had no idea what these men were talking about. Was it some kind of prank? A misunderstanding? His thoughts were a jumble of confusion and curiosity. He sat up in bed, trying to make sense of it all. Was there a secret they were keeping from him? From Sandra? The room suddenly felt colder, and he shivered, hoping the whispers would stop. Sandra, still blissfully unaware, shifted in her sleep, causing Keanu to snap back to attention. His instincts told him something was off, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Finally, in a moment of frustration, he leaned toward Sandra and whispered, "Sandra, did you hear that?" Sandra's eyes fluttered open and she stared at him with a sleepy expression. "Hear what?" Keanu looked toward the corner of the room where the whispers had come from, but there was nothing there. The room was empty, just the two of them. "Never mind," Keanu muttered, still puzzled. "I must be hearing things." Sandra, now wide awake, sat up and yawned. "Keanu, you're not making any sense. What's going on?" Before Keanu could answer, the door to their suite suddenly creaked open, and two men stepped inside. One was tall, with dark sunglasses, and the other was shorter, but no less intimidating. "We need to talk," the taller man said, his voice low and serious. Keanu's eyes widened. "About what?" The shorter man glanced at the room, almost as if scanning for something. "Not here," he said, before swiftly motioning for Keanu and Sandra to follow. Still clueless about what was happening, Keanu exchanged a nervous glance with Sandra. He had no idea who these men were, what they wanted, or why they were suddenly involved in this strange situation. But one thing was certain. This wasn't just an ordinary hotel stay. The mysterious encounter would lead them both down a path neither of them could have ever imagined. As Keanu and Sandra followed the two mysterious men down the hallway, the atmosphere seemed to grow even more tense. The walls of the hotel, once warm and welcoming, now felt like they were closing in. Sandra shot Keanu a puzzled look, her face a mix of confusion and caution. She whispered, "Do you have any idea what's going on?" Keanu shook his head, equally in the dark. "No clue, but something doesn't feel right." The two men led them to a hidden elevator at the far end of the hall, one that wasn't on any of the hotel maps. The elevator itself looked out of place, sleek and modern compared to the vintage decor of the rest of the hotel. The taller man pressed a button and the doors slid open silently. "Where are we going?" Keanu asked, his voice edged with curiosity and concern. "You'll find out soon enough," the shorter man replied, his tone cryptic. The elevator descended slowly, far deeper into the hotel's foundations than any normal floors would go. Keanu and Sandra exchanged glances, their nerves mounting with each passing second. Finally, the elevator came to a stop, and the doors opened to reveal a dimly lit underground chamber. The room was unlike anything either of them had ever seen. Walls lined with strange, ancient-looking symbols, and shelves filled with old, dusty books and odd artifacts that seemed to glow faintly in the low light. At the center of the room stood a large stone table, and as they entered, Keanu could sense an air of urgency in the men's movements. "This is where it all began," the tall man said, his voice now steady, almost reverent. "What began?" Sandra asked, her voice firm but with a trace of unease. The shorter man took a deep breath. "The whispers you heard earlier, they weren't just in your head. The two of you have been chosen." Keanu frowned. "Chosen for what?" The taller man moved toward one of the shelves and pulled out an ancient-looking tome. He placed it on the table in front of them and opened it to a page that was covered in strange symbols and illustrations that seemed almost alive. "This book contains the truth," the man said. "A truth that's been hidden for centuries. There are forces at play in this world, things that most people will never understand. But you two, you're not ordinary people. You've been unknowingly tied to something much bigger." Sandra's heart pounded as she stepped closer to the table, her eyes scanning the page, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. "What is this?" she asked. "This is the key," the shorter man said, pointing at the symbols. "This book holds the secret to a hidden power, but it's also a curse. Whoever tries to uncover its full knowledge risks losing everything, including their very soul." Keanu, ever the skeptic, couldn't shake the feeling that he was being pulled into something far beyond his control. "Why us?" he asked. "Why are we here?" "Because," the tall man began, looking them both in the eye, "you were meant to be here. The events that have brought you to this moment, it's no coincidence." Sandra looked at Keanu, her face a mix of disbelief and realization. "The movie we were filming, it wasn't just a movie, was it? This was a test." The shorter man nodded slowly. "Exactly. Your roles in that film were part of a much larger plan, a puzzle that's been in the making for years. And now that you're here, there's no turning back." A chill ran down Keanu's spine. He could feel the weight of their words, but the idea that a simple film had been the catalyst for this strange journey seemed impossible. "We need to stop this," Sandra said, her voice rising. "This, whatever it is, it's too dangerous." The tall man's expression softened. "It's already too late, but you can still control the outcome. You just have to decide how far you're willing to go." Just then, a loud bang echoed from the far side of the chamber, and the lights flickered. Keanu instinctively reached for Sandra, his heart racing as shadows moved across the walls. "We're not alone," the shorter man whispered urgently. "They found us." Before they could react, the stone table began to tremble, and the strange symbols on the walls began to glow brighter. It was clear that they had just scratched the surface of something far darker than they could have ever imagined. Keanu and Sandra were no longer just actors in a film. They were now players in a dangerous, high-stakes game where the lines between reality and fiction were blurred and the consequences were very real. And as the whispers grew louder again, they realized one thing. They had no choice but to face whatever was coming next, or risk losing everything. The tremors underfoot grew stronger, and the air in the underground chamber thickened, as though the room itself was holding its breath. Sandra grabbed Keanu's arm, her grip tight as she tried to steady herself. Her instincts screamed that they were in over their heads, but there was no turning back now. The shadows that had danced across the walls began to take form. Figures appeared in the dim light, tall and imposing, moving like phantoms, their faces obscured by hoods and dark cloaks. The two men who had led Keanu and Sandra here stepped forward, positioning themselves in front of the stone table as though guarding it from the intruders. "They know," the shorter man muttered under his breath, his face tense. "They've been searching for this book for years." Keanu, now fully alert, surveyed the figures. "Who are they?" The tall man stepped aside, revealing the full force of their adversaries. "They are the Keepers," he explained, "guardians of the dark knowledge that this book contains. They will stop at nothing to ensure it remains hidden." Sandra, her mind racing, turned to Keanu. "What are we supposed to do? This is beyond us. We're just actors, not warriors." Before Keanu could answer, one of the shadowy figures stepped forward. His voice, low and gravelly, echoed through the chamber. "You should have stayed out of this. But now that you've found the book, you're part of the game." Keanu, his usual calm demeanor now replaced with a sense of urgency, stood tall. "What game? What do you want from us?" The figure didn't respond immediately. Instead, he raised his hand, and with a swift motion, the room was flooded with a strange, otherworldly energy. It buzzed in the air like static electricity, charging the atmosphere. "The book holds a power that could reshape the world," the keeper said, his voice now a hiss, his eyes glowing faintly red. "If we cannot keep it hidden, we will destroy it, and you along with it." Sandra's pulse raced. "We don't even know how to use it. We're just here because of some test," the shorter man interrupted, nodding grimly. "Yes, it's true, but the fact remains, you are the ones who must decide whether the book's power is unleashed or sealed away forever." Keanu turned toward the book, his gaze steady. The symbols on its pages were shifting, glowing brighter as the keepers closed in. He could feel it now, the pull of the book, a magnetic force that seemed to draw him closer, even though every part of him screamed to step back. "What happens if we choose wrong?" he asked, trying to make sense of it all. The tall man stepped forward, his voice firm. "If the wrong choice is made, the consequences will be catastrophic. The world will be thrown into chaos, with nothing left to save it." Keanu and Sandra stood frozen for a moment, their minds racing. Their lives had just taken a turn they couldn't have prepared for, and now they had to make a decision that could alter the course of history itself. The keepers were drawing closer, their ominous figures creeping forward like a dark tide. Keanu knew they had little time left to decide. "Keanu," Sandra whispered urgently, pulling his arm, "we have to act. There has to be another way out of this." Keanu glanced at her, his face determined. "I don't know what that way is yet, but we can't just give up." Without warning, he bolted toward the book. Sandra, in an instinctual act of solidarity, followed him. The room seemed to darken as they approached the stone table, the keeper's voices rising in an eerie chant. The symbols on the book's pages now seemed to swirl and pulse with an almost hypnotic rhythm. Keanu hesitated for only a second, his hand hovering over the pages. Sandra was right behind him, eyes wide with fear and determination. He knew they had to act fast. Just as his fingers brushed the edges of the book, the shorter man shouted, "No! You mustn't!" But it was too late. A blinding light erupted from the book, engulfing Keanu and Sandra in a wave of pure energy. The room around them seemed to dissolve, replaced by swirling visions of far-off lands and ancient landscapes. They saw glimpses of battles from long ago, of forgotten civilizations, and of a power so vast it threatened to tear the very fabric of reality apart. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The chamber, the keepers, and the book all vanished, leaving Keanu and Sandra standing alone in a vast, empty space. They were no longer in the hotel. Sandra looked around, disoriented. What just happened? Keanu, just as stunned, glanced down at his hands, which were still trembling from the force of the energy that had flowed through him. "I think we've just crossed into another world." The air around them was thick with tension, as though they were standing at the very edge of something monumental. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the distance, soft yet commanding. "You've chosen. Now, you must face what lies ahead." Keanu and Sandra exchanged glances, their hearts racing with the knowledge that whatever this new world held, they were no longer just actors. They were part of something far greater and far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. And somewhere in the distance, the whispers began again.